In your life right now, right this moment, you may be experiencing a problem, a challenge. You may have more than one problem. You may have various concerns throughout your life where it seems like life is just lifing and you are not getting a moment to take a deep breath and just recuperate yourself and then get back on the treadmill and keep it moving, right? That you feel like eventually things are going to be too much, right? And you don't feel like there isn't a break in life. Well, when it comes to problems, it's important to recognize that problems are finite, but you are infinite. My name is Peter Abundant, aka Dr. Abundant, PhD, ordained minister of metaphysical sciences, which is ultimately the study of spirituality. I am also the author of The Enlightened Shadow and Spiritual, Not Religious. Now, when it comes to problems, understanding that the problem is something that is finite, meaning there's a limit to it, meaning ultimately it'll pass. But in the current moment, it doesn't seem like it. And I get it. I have to deal with problems as well. And though I have the tools, the insight, the wisdom, the knowledge to recognize the problem and really understand what it truly is, rather than letting it really carry me and ruin my day and really take away my energy and have me feeling a sense of loss, like I'm not connected with purpose, it really can still have a impact in the moment when I am stepping out of my, realization of self and really identifying with that ego side of yourself, right? So I understand. But the thing is, again, when you get into who you truly are, consciousness, pure consciousness, the part of you that actually observes and is aware of self, then you recognize, wait a minute, there is a separation here. In that separation is the opportunity to identify who you truly are versus the problem, right? Separating yourself from the problem. That is the key. That is one of the pivotal, monumental, important pillars of spirituality, the benefit of spirituality, recognizing the self and recognizing the problem and understanding self is not the problem, you see. But we live in a reality, in a world where we identify with the things that we are experiencing. We are identifying with the feelings, the thoughts, right? The ideas that other people have implanted within us. So you're moving through life with these belief systems that aren't necessarily yours. You haven't gone through the work of actually processing and identifying which belief systems are yours. You're going through life having these thoughts based on these false belief systems. You're going through life having these emotions, these triggers based on your false self, which is the ego. Thinking that the ego is truly who you are, when in fact it is not. But when you take on this spiritual journey, it is a conscious recognition that something is off, that there is a misalignment in how you are experiencing life. And thus you start to gain the tools, right? You start to make yourself available to the wisdom that is already there to recognize that, okay, this idea of who I thought myself to be is actually a false idea. And to recognize when you see the clouds of those belief systems, those thoughts, those ideas, right? When you recognize those clouds, not as who you are, but simply expressions of a untrained mind, right? Because when you had those thoughts and those belief systems programmed within you, it's because you just didn't know better. But as you are going down this journey of spirituality, you are recognizing, right? So you begin to make a reckoning as to, okay, this is who I am. Then you start to understand how to create not necessarily a separation of yourself from the ego, but just simply recognizing that the ego has a place and you must be the one responsible to put it in this place rather than assuming that you are the ego. You see, the ego, its job is just to protect you in this physical realm, in this physical body, to identify a level, a sense of separation between you and other people to prevent you, to allow you to recognize, right, when the possibility of harm is at hand. Now, again, that is based on a primal basic instinct of the human condition. That is just what we came with. Okay. But as you grow up, as you gain insight and wisdom on the spiritual journey, you recognize that I am not the ego. And this idea of separation is false only while we are here in this physical realm, right? And that this whole realm is actually a simulation. The truth of the matter, the real reality is in fact your consciousness, which can often be recognized as your mind, your ability to process information, think things through from the perspective of your consciousness, the part of you that is truly you, the part of you that is the witness, the awareness of all that is. But you have to recognize just because you are aware of it, that you recognize it, that those things you are aware of and recognizing are not you. Okay? They are just simply experiences. They are experiences that often are byproducts of what you decide to be. Okay? Who you decide to associate with, what you decide to feel, what you decide to think, what actions you decide to take. Okay. So you understand that, okay, the experiences that I'm having now, AKA the problems, right, that I'm facing are the result of the way I was thinking, or maybe even not thinking, the way that I was being, or maybe even not being, that resulted in this moment. But now you get to understand that just like every other moment, every other problem that existed throughout your life that you can remember, those problems passed. Why is that? Because each of these problems, each of these results are only temporary. They're finite. Okay? They come and go. This too shall pass. And once you recognize that you have gotten through all of those previous quote unquote problems, you identify the simple fact that you will get through this, that this problem will also pass. Now, what does this say to you on a very deep level? This says to you that these problems, these situations, these challenges, they come and go, but you still remain, right? You still exist. You do not dissolve. In fact, you evolve. You ascend to another level, even if it is in this most minute, smallest degree. And so you recognize the difference between your problem being something that is finite, something that you are simply labeling a problem, giving a little bit of power to it because maybe, yes, it's uncomfortable, it's not ideal, but really you understand that it isn't necessarily a problem, right? It is just something that you find to be just irritating and frustrating. But your higher self recognizes it as not a problem, but actually an opportunity to wake up, an opportunity to recognize, okay, one, you identify it as a problem now because you are now more evolved than you were when you created the problem. You see, the problem is a result of your past ways of thinking, being, so forth, and etc. Okay. You were doing things, being away, and that resulted in this present problem. But now you recognize it's a problem. It's uncomfortable to you. You don't want to experience it. In order for you to change the problem, you have to recognize that you have changed and thus change the thoughts, the emotions, the actions. So that way this problem will, once it passes, something else will take its place, which will ideally be something that you find enjoyable, something that you are in love with, passionate about, grateful for. Okay. So you have to shift from identifying with the ego. When you identify with the ego, you are again driven by negative belief systems that weren't yours in the first place, that were given to you, right, by either your parents, by people you grew up with, even by your current surroundings and the people you know, okay, the media you consume. When you recognize that, okay, you are not the ego, that you have to ask yourself the question, then who am I? What am I? Okay. Because understanding the word, hearing the word consciousness is one thing, but to really identify it within yourself is another. To identify oneself as pure consciousness is truly the gift of spirituality, right? It's the gift of beginning this journey of mastering yourself. And so the best way to do that is to practice things like meditation, practice things like mindfulness, okay? Practice really tapping into self-awareness, looking at yourself from a non-judgmental, very as objective as possible state of being, right? From that very lens of just really observing from a place of love, not a place of just trying to ignore, not trying to face the truth, but to actually observe the truth, observe your patterns, observe how you think, how you feel, right? Behaviors, truly observe them and ask yourself, are they getting you what it is that you desire? Because if you recognize that there is a disconnection between what you are doing, being, saying, who you're hanging around with, right, and what you desire, then that is a great opportunity for you to identify, you know what, there's a disconnection. And in order for me to connect with that desire, I must make sure that who I am being is compatible, right, with that desire. That who am I being is actually the same frequency of that which I desire. Now you may be asking, okay, how do you connect? How do you find that frequency? It's already there. The very fact that you desire something means that it is in your ability. Okay. It is available to you. All right. Once you are able to comprehend something, even if it is in your imagination, that is all you need to actually get to it, to actually materialize it, to actually manifest it, to actually align with it. Okay. You just simply have to explore conceptualizing, explore the feelings of having it, explore the action, the ways of being that will align you to creating that thing. So it's about recognizing who you truly are. When you recognize that you are consciousness and that you are above all the problems, all the drama, all the struggles, when you recognize you are above all of that, then those things, though they come up in life because that is what life is about, and that is why we experience them, is to help us recognize who we are. It is to bring light, right? Even though it is a moment of darkness, without darkness, there cannot be light. So you recognize that, wait a minute, you are going through, right, these problems because one, you have been identifying with the ego, but two, you also have to recognize that the problems are going to support you in recognizing your truth, recognizing the true essence of who you are. So you have to reframe the problem. Okay. When you reframe the problem, you reframe it from a perspective of infinite potentiality, right? You being your true self, you understanding your infinite beingness. Okay. And this basically shows you how to shrink the problem, because many times what happens is when we have to deal with a problem, what we often do is that problem gets huge in our own minds. Nobody else is experiencing the problem, but the problem begins to grow within us because, again, we're being led by the ego, which is a fear-based system, right? It recognizes danger. And so the more you identify or see something from the point of view of the ego, then the more that thing is going to grow and grow and grow. And so a problem that was once the size of an ant, when you're not understanding ego versus consciousness and how the problem actually is a mechanism for change and changing your awareness from one of being aware from the ego standpoint to a consciousness standpoint, then eventually over time, that small ant becomes an elephant or a whale, okay, from your perspective, from that egotistical reality. So you have to recognize yourself as pure consciousness, the part of you that will never cease to exist, that will always remain. Just like even now, you recognize when I use the example of the problems that you have dealt with before, they have passed and gone. Okay. And this problem will do the same thing, but you will always be there. That is a very good way to visualize all problems in general, to visualize even the ego, because the ego is the source of all your problems. When you recognize that, it's not about killing the ego. It's not about having that ego death, because we need the ego in this physical realm. It is about, again, putting it in its place. And you put it in its place by just simply recognizing this concept, sitting with it, right? Reflecting upon it, meditating on it. Okay. Be mindful is all it takes. Do not distract yourself moment to moment with either the media, your phone, watching movies, stepping away from yourself. The more time you spend with yourself, the more you will understand who yourself truly is. And the more you will let go of all these false concepts that essentially has created the problem. So what I want you to affirm is that you are the creator, okay? You're not the victim of reality. And just like I always say, the universe is happening from you, not to you. So once you recognize who you truly are, being pure consciousness, and that is forever, that is infinite, that is the universe, then everything else is just a simple matter of experience. It's a simple matter of choice in choosing to have that experience and how long you want to keep that experience. But the point of the experience is to wake you up to the truth that you are consciousness. Thank you so much. Feel free, go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, and get access to this free ebook, The Power Within. Continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.